think we're live here. What if my singing got caught in there? Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about some globalist propaganda that's doing the rounds, about trying to shame people into accepting illegal aliens into the West. Now, they're doing the usual sort of thing. They're getting, well-known TV personalities, movie stars, people with a sort of public following, as they say, to address the persuadable public. What a cynical thing that is. That's come out of the globalists in the United States, that persuadable public. So this, it's like a TV advertisement sort of thing that the globalists have funded, and it tugs on the heartstrings. So who are the illegal aliens, the illegal immigrants? Who are they? Well, they're mothers with little crying babies. A mother and the baby, a little crying baby, and they just want safety. They just want something to eat. That's all they want. And you've got a problem with that. You're asking questions about that. You damn fucking fascist Nazi. How dare you ask a question about that? Now, is that the reality, that we've got, desperate mothers with, babies and this sort of thing? Well, I suppose there'll be a few of them around, but that's hardly the reality. Or let's try another one. So your aging mother and father, they're so infirm, they're in their wheelchair, they're suffering horribly, and all they want to do is be in the arms of their loved ones. That's all they want. They don't want anything. They're in a wheelchair, and they're so frail, they're so alone, they're so helpless. That's all they want to do. And you're questioning that. You're questioning them. Them coming in with loved ones. You fucking fascist Nazi. So any questions or opposition to mass migration, and whether it be illegal or otherwise, they're trying to portray you as, the fascist, heartless, evil Nazi, Hitler, and that's how the propaganda goes. Before we go any further, we need to understand that the most central plank of the globalisation project, the absolute central plank, all roads lead back to this, is mass migration of black and brown people into the white countries. There's no mass migration of black people into China. There's no mass migration of Indian people into China. There is only mass migration of black, brown peasants into the white country. It is a completely one way, and that is the most central, fundamental, basic plank of globalisation in the globalist project. All roads lead back to that. So they will do anything and everything, tell any lie, accept any amount of collateral damage to pursue that objective. So you need to understand that when you look at this silly and rather hysterical propaganda, and they get these silly idiots to, these movie stars or TV personalities to do the advertisements. So it's projected, or it's depicted as just helpless people wanting to come to safety. That's really it. Now, what's the reality, though? Is any reality covered by this? Does this reflect or any reality? Well, no. It's a total falsehood. Could you find somewhere amongst the many hundreds of millions of people? Could you find a mother with a child? Of course, you could somewhere. Now, did they bring it on themselves? I mean, so you could change the advert. For example, say you're running a counter advert to counter that outrageous globalist and untrue globalist propaganda narrative. So you could, for example, let's try one now. such and such country X in Africa has been in a state of civil war, famine, and tribal warfare for more than 2,000 years. And this is another one. They're doing it again. They've never learned how to manage their affairs. They're constantly in a state of warfare, burning each other's crops, killing each other's cattle. And so as soon as there's a bit of a drought or something comes along, then famine is widespread and people die in large numbers. This is completely self-inflicted. The white people have tried to help them. Billions have been spent handing out to these people to protect them. But for every mouthful of food we give them, they'll just procreate and have more children. And most of the money is siphoned off by corrupt warlords and dictators and mafia-type goons. And try as hard as the West has, and the West tried very hard again, giving billions upon billions upon billions to these people. Their situation never seems to improve, and they're in just about a state as they were 2,000 years ago, and probably longer than that. What the United Nations does when these things happen is the United Nations makes refugee camps where these people are given food and water, clothing, shelter and medical attention. It's not perfect, but typically it's much better than they experienced when they were living on their own means in their own villages, even before any civil war or tribal warfare or famine took place. So they're doing much better. But NGO activists come around and they're employed by the globalists, and they tell these simple peasants that they should go to the West and just parasite off the white countries, get all this free stuff, and they encourage women with children to go because they know that they'll be able to use emotional blackmail to get into the West when they arrive, and the NGOs to tell these people what to say and the lies to tell to get entrance into the white Western countries. And the NGOs even help them get there. They'll use all sorts of transport provided by the NGOs that are funded by the United Nations and various other groups. The globalists really want to move these people into the West, so they encourage these people movements. And so on. You could do something like that, which would paint a very dark picture of globalist forces and NGOs that were artificially stacking the deck and priming the pump and doing all that sort of thing, which is, by the way, the reality. So, but instead they try and suggest that any white people that question it or disagree are Nazis or fascists or racists and xenophobes and any other name they can think up, which of course is completely untrue. Now, young women or young women, but any women with young children, they wouldn't attempt a long hazardous journey of thousands of miles, across deserts and all this sort of thing with a 6-month infant in tow, or if they were 6 months pregnant, they wouldn't attempt that. And so they're only doing it because they're encouraged to do it and because they're given lots of help and support by the NGOs. And the NGOs, tell them, look, don't stop in that country. The benefits aren't that good. Go to this country where they give more benefits. Go to the other. And so these so-called illegals that in England they're not allowed to say no to, they've passed through. I mean, I've counted. If you look at where the main refugee camps are, these people typically pass through an average of 8 countries, including multiple refugee camps, by the way. They pass through 8 countries to get to France, and from there they go illegally to England. So now this is something that the propaganda doesn't say. Why did you pass through 8 countries, including places that had refugee camps where you would have got all the food and water and shelter and safety you need? So it's not an issue of safety. They pretend that it's safety, that running from bombs. Now, all right, let's say that the only country where bombs are dropping, still they have to pass through 7 or 8 countries, safe countries, to get to England or to Britain. So that still doesn't stack up. If safety is the issue, then they've got safety close by, there's typically going to be a refugee camp. Controlled by the United Nations and various NGOs. There's going to be a refugee camp that's going to have more and better food than they're ever used to, medical care that they've never been used to, reliable water supply that they've rarely been used to, things like electricity and so on, and all sorts of things like a medical centre that's air conditioned and so on. They're going to have all that sort of stuff that they wouldn't have had anyway in their villages, and they're safe. So this idea that they have to, the only place they can go in the whole world is England to get safety. I mean, what absolute nonsense! What outrageous lie! I mean, who would fall for such lies? But it's and little Magombo coming with in his bare feet, and he walked in, and the suffering, and the bombs are dropping, and the evil Hitler's everywhere trying to get in. All he wants to do is be safe, and you question that, you Nazi. So they create this completely false narrative. Now, the majority of people, as in 85% of these illegals, are young men, under the age of 35. So between the age of 20 and 35. That's the vast majority. You will get the occasional woman with a young child, but not very many. If even 5% of that. And they've been encouraged and helped and assisted and aided and abetted to make a journey they otherwise would not have made. So they're being moved from the refugee camp, a place of safety where they have everything they need there. They're being moved from there to a first worldwide country that has the maximum handouts and benefits. So that's all that's happening. They're moving to a place where they can get a free ride and parasite off the local taxpayers. Now, that's the reality, but it goes to show just the extent, and the globalists sort of watch this quite carefully. Well, I'm noticing a bit, they must have some monitoring, they do have a monitoring process for online. Okay, we're seeing an upsurge in the amount of people who have got a problem, who are questioning the illegal aliens, questioning the mass migration. So, okay, all right, we need to respond to that. Let's hit it hard with a high-powered propaganda campaign to shut these people up and just let them know if they do have a problem with it, it means they're fucking Nazis, and that'll put them back in their box. So this is clearly going on. The college kids and the younger people, especially the women, the young girls, they respond to this sort of stuff. And if you try and explain to them, like friends of mine, who've got daughters and so on, who are, say, in second year college at some gender studies, sociology bullshit degree, and they're getting plied with this propaganda non-stop. And even you explain it to them and say, well, look, these people are already in a refugee camp and safe. And, oh, well, I wouldn't like it if I was in a refugee camp. Fine, but you've been born and brought up in a middle-class, white, prosperous Western society. These people have been brought up in a little shanty village out in the middle of nowhere. So they have no conception of a first world lifestyle. All they understand is the rural village with no running water, no electricity, and so on. They don't have the same perception of reality as you do in terms of the first. Oh, well, they're entitled to a first world existence as well. What's wrong with that? Why can't they be in the first world? Well, why should they be? Why don't you go and live over there? You almost can't talk to these people. They have this view of super entitlement that must apply only to black and brown peasants. And why can't they have it? And again, these are people who are living. This one girl, she's probably 20, 21 or something, and she lives in her parents' house. They're quite well to do. They've bought her a car. She has these fashion designer label clothes bought for by her parents, and she lives an existence where when her parents are like say on a hot day, like her parents are out at work or doing something or other, and she gets back from uni, for example. She puts on the air conditioning for the whole house, and it's quite a large house. She doesn't put on the section of the air conditioning where her room is. which would be, I don't know, 1/4 of the house or something like that. She'll put on for the home, just leave it on. And so, electricity bills are absolutely huge. She doesn't care. She doesn't have to pay for it. So it's hard to find a person who's more irresponsible than she is, and who is more careless with money and so on. She has that attitude of entitlement, and she assumes that these black brown peasants should. Well, why can't they have this? I have them. Why can't they have them? But it'd be different if she had to work for those things and be responsible for them. But she's not. So that the more the greater the level of irresponsibility and manufactured victimhood these people have, the more they seem to support this nonsense propaganda. But I just wanted to talk a bit about that. That none of these illegals are moving themselves. It's the NGOs, the people smugglers. It's an entire infrastructure, either abetted directly, funded directly, or indirectly by the globalist project to get as many black and brown people into the West as they can, including, by the way, vast numbers of people who are handicapped or ill or whatever that can't get the level of medical care in their third world basket case country. I mean, if that's not a reason, so how can we make their countries better? So that they want to stay. You don't find people wanting to leave first world countries and go to a third world country. Why? Why would they? It's only the one-way traffic from the third world. And it didn't used to happen, but because moving black and brown folks into the white countries is again a central and fundamental plank of the globalist project, and we see so much of it. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.